Here we're going to take a look at using the drawing tool in Mastering Chemistry. I'm on the assignment Introduction to Mastering Chemistry in the question Introduction to Drawing Lewis Structures. For this question, we have to copy this sodium formate ionic compound into the template below. And so we don't need to know anything about sodium formate at this point in the class. The whole purpose of this is just to practice drawing in Mastering Chemistry. Alright, so here is our template for drawing. You'll see at the bottom there are atomic symbols, so these are the elements that we can use. When you select more, you'll get the periodic table for more elements. Beside that, in the bottom left, are positive and negative signs to assign charges. On the left-hand side, there are different types of bonds to use, as well as electrons. There is a single electron and two electrons, which is called a lone pair of electrons. At the top, there's a select tool, an eraser, and then magnifying glasses to make the image bigger or smaller. And eventually, once you start working, you'll get an undo and a redo button. So the first thing I'm going to do is just click in the box. The first click that you make by default will give you a carbon-carbon single bond, and this gives us a good starting place to work off of to finish drawing sodium formate. I'm going to say that this carbon is the central carbon in the compound, and then we're going to work off of this. The next bond that we'd see in sodium formate would be a carbon-hydrogen bond, so what I want to do is turn this carbon into hydrogen. I can do that by going to the elements below, clicking on hydrogen, and then clicking on this carbon. You want to make sure that it turns blue so that when you click on it, it changes to hydrogen. The next thing I want to do is make that carbon-oxygen single bond, and in the sodium formate that you see in Mastering Chemistry, it is down to the bottom right of that central carbon. And so I'm going to click on this carbon and drag. I'm going to make sure to have oxygen selected, and I'm going to click on the carbon and hold that click and then drag down. And by dragging, we get that carbon-oxygen bond. If you just click on the carbon with oxygen selected, you turn it into oxygen. So I don't want to do that. I want to make sure oxygen selected, click and drag down, and then release. And that gives us the carbon-oxygen single bond. From carbon there is one more bond, and that's a double bond to oxygen. So since I have oxygen selected, I'm going to click and drag up to get that last oxygen. And since it has the two lines, that means it's a double bond. And in order to turn this single bond to a double bond, we want to just click it one more time to get that double bond. If there was a triple bond, you could click another time to get a triple bond. And you can just scroll through and make sure you have whatever bond you want selected. So we want a double bond, so we'll leave it at that. The last element that we need is sodium. Sodium, we'll have to go to the periodic table, select sodium, and put that on our template. So if you look at your sodium formate, it's not bonded to this oxygen, so we would not want to make a bond like that. That's incorrect. What happens is this oxygen will have a negative charge and the sodium next to it will have a positive charge. That's called an ionic bond, and it's connected by the interaction between positive and negative charges. So we just want to put sodium next to this oxygen but kind of floating away from it, not connected by a bond. And then we'll put those charges. The sodium has a positive charge, so I'm going to go down to this plus sign, select it, and then push on sodium. This oxygen has a negative sign. I'm going to go to the negative sign and then select oxygen. And we can assign the charges. The very last thing are electrons. You'll notice that this oxygen that's double bonded to carbon has 4 dots around it. Those are 2 lone pairs of electrons. We want to go to this lone pair of electrons, select it, then hover over oxygen, make sure it turns blue, and then click twice to get those 2 lone pairs of electrons. This oxygen with the negative charge has 3 lone pairs, so same idea. We want to select the lone pairs and click on this oxygen 3 times to give the 3 lone pairs. This should be our sodium formate compound, and when we hit submit, we should be good to go.